All right, welcome to the New Legend Podcast. Today is a first for us because this is my first solo episode. Definitely not my favorite thing to do, but we're going to give it a shot. Luke's not here, friends are not here, interesting guests are not here. It's just me and you. And today we're going to talk about a couple different things: vehicle-based adventure and equipment. So I'm excited to be here, but first, just want to say quick, man, my heart goes out and is heavy for those people who are struggling in this odd time, this difficult time, whether it's with health or job or like all those different things that are happening. So I thought we could talk about something that I really love to think about, and many of you love to think about, and that is adventure, camping, just kind of taking our vehicles, getting out there on the open road and seeing things open up again. So really excited about that. And I just thought we would talk about that tonight. So thank you to those of you that asked some questions via Instagram. We're going to answer some of those. So we're going to talk vehicle-based adventure, sleeping options, some general gear questions, some trips I'm dreaming about, and hopefully you're dreaming about some trips as well. And I had a good question: the most surprising piece of gear that I've obtained or bought. And so, yeah, it'll be fun, man. It'll be fun to think about. So, but first, before we get started, I wanted to thank the people that make this podcast possible. And those are some good friends of ours. Kenda Tire, really appreciate this brand. They care a lot about automotive enthusiasts, people that drive, people that love adventure, and they have some great tires that equip us for our adventures. And we fell in love with their brand and their tires first, and then, man, we built a relationship, and here we are today. We've probably put 15 to 20,000 miles and equipped many vehicles with the Kenda Cleaver RT. It's a rough terrain. It's like in between an all-terrain and a mud terrain. So love those tires. Served us well. Really excited this year we've got our hands on a set, but to see come out to the general public, the new Kenda Cleaver AT, the KR628, brand new design that looks good, and it'll just be like a little more road friendly. It's got that Snowstar rating. So we're excited to get our hands on those and see those get onto more of our rigs. So again, thanks Kenda. Go check them out. And if you need some tires, get a set. Also, our friends over at Hagerty, man, I just think of how many people insure their vehicles, their classic beloved vehicles, to insurance companies that don't really care about classic cars or loving the whole culture that we're a part of. And Hagerty does, man. They put a lot of money and effort into supporting car communities, ours included. They're a sponsor of all of our meetups, and they've just been super helpful. And so check them out. It's easy to get a quote. You'll be surprised at the rates. And more importantly, your truck will be in good hands. They're also like digging lately onto the 80s and 90s cars. As you know, I have a few 80s domestic turbo cars, and I'm digging those, and they cover those and know those as well. So go to their website, Hagerty.com, and check them out. Okay. Let's get into our episode, and do me a favor, give me some feedback, man. This is a new format for me. I'm usually used to and way more comfortable just having a discussion. So this is kind of weird, but I'm envisioning myself having a discussion with you as a friend. So first, I thought I would also share just a couple books that I've been reading. Really been helping shape my thinking, and it's always good to grow the mind, as busy as we all are. One of those is Atomic Habits by an author named James Clear, and it's basically how little changes in our lives can have exponential results, like looking for those 1% improvements. And he also talks a lot about this connection between like identity and behavior, and as our behavior becomes a habit, how those habits then come back around and begin to shape our identity. I'm happy to, hopefully we can get him on the podcast and we can talk more about the idea of habits. we've talked about on the show quite a bit about just forming habits of study or thinking or time with your spouse, like all those good things, family time, or also just time to work on your rig. You definitely have to it takes discipline. And once it becomes a habit, it becomes much easier and more natural. So really good book. I recommend it, Atomic Habits. Also, a brand new one. I'm one chapter in. It's called Range by David Epstein. And it's very interesting, exploring kind of the generalist versus the specialized. Like we see such a movement, if you have kids, into like early specialization and how that may not be the best thing. And in a world that is so specialized, how we need people to have a range of skill and are generalist. And you've often heard it said, like, I'm a master of, what is it, like master of all things, master of none? I don't know, whatever. Good at a lot of things, but not like really honed in like I'm a math expert. But anyway, interesting stuff, mind growing, recommend those. And again, hope to get those authors on the show. So we posted a story asking for your questions on Instagram, and thank you so much for those of you that participated. And man, I have to tell you, for me, thinking about the projects I have going on, thinking about my Scout or adventure vehicles, but more just getting out on the road with my family and friends is such a passion of mine. I really, really love it. And especially in this time of being cooped up for a while, not able to travel, I've been like kind of really jonesing for it. And and we're going to talk about stuff. And even though getting out is for us, it's not about, and for me, it's not about the stuff. It's about the memories and the experience, mostly with people. The stuff enables those things. Like we said, like things are more memorable in a vintage 4x4. I really believe that. Time with your family is, there's something magical and memorable about the connection of an old vehicle, a vintage vehicle, and the memories that we make, the memories that we have. In gear and equipment, I kind of have a similar perspective on it. Just that it helps us enjoy the experiences a little more. It can enhance the experience. It can also take away from the experience. A friend, Scott Brady, and also just another little shout out to the Overland Journal podcast with Scott Brady. Give that a listen. It's super informative. And those guys, Scott and Matt, they just do a great job with that podcast. So if you want to dive in deeper to overlanding and gear and philosophy and all that stuff, give those guys a check because it's super good. Okay, so we're going to talk about gear. We're going to talk specifically about sleeping arrangements, tents, primarily tents. And we'll exclude like some of the habitat systems and like truck campers and like the four-wheel camper, like some of that kind of stuff, because they're not super applicable yet for our vintage 4x4s, Broncos, FJ40s, FJ60s, Scouts, obviously, Wagoneers, old Blazers. What we're going to focus on is things that are more attainable for people in the vintage 4x4 community. So I'm going to run through those sleeping systems. And Handsome Cal on Instagram, thank you, asked, what is the best rooftop tent for a Scout 800? But I'm going to answer that more generally. So let's pop into that. Drinking some water, man. I've had a lot of coffee today. I'm excited to check out this Drive coffee, but it's 300. I was just reading, man. It's 300 milligrams of caffeine. So, and it's 7:30 at night, and so I don't want to get all juiced up. Okay, so first and foremost, the simplest means of a sleeping system outside of a car. And just a quick note, all of these systems I'm going to talk about, I have a decent amount of experience going on road trips for the last 25 years. Like, dude, I've slept in a lot of different situations, from super sketch to super comfortable, solo and family. So we'll kind of dive into like a little bit about like, is this a good solution if you're alone or with a buddy or with your wife or with a family? So those things matter. But number one, sleeping in the vehicle. Often overlooked. It is the most simple, quickest. If you have a Scout, if you have a Bronco, it might be tight. If you have a Scout 800, it might be tight, depending on the weather. But anyway, pros, sleeping in a vehicle. First, I will say sleeping in the front seat of a bucket seat vehicle really sucks. Like, I hate it. Yeah, it's good for like a 2-hour power nap if you don't like one road trip I took. I got this like 2003 Jaguar and I drove it from California to Iowa. It was awesome because I made it in like 28 hours, 27 hours. And I slept for like 3 hours and just like reclined the seat, and it wasn't like super cold. But the colder it is and the longer you sleep, it's terrible to sleep. So don't even try it, man. Especially in like a vintage seat that doesn't recline, absolutely miserable. And most of our trucks have bucket seats. You have a bench seat, it can work. But if you have bucket seats with a center console, even more difficult. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in a Scout or an FJ60. Even like my daughter and I drove her Volvo 240 wagon from California to Iowa last fall. Man, we just laid down the seats, crashed out in the back. That was super fun. So we're talking about sleeping in the back of the vehicle, and also recommending get a sleeping pad. We'll talk about this with ground tents, but there's certain gear that goes along with a lot of these sleeping methods, in a good quality ground, like a sleeping pad. All of ours are from Nemo, super good quality, well designed. They have Nemo sleeping pads have like a pump system. You don't have to blow them up with your mouth. I hate that, especially as a dad with 4 kids going on long road trips or like going backpacking, and you get stuck blowing up everyone's sleeping pad and you feel like you're going to pass out. So, number 1, pros, super easy. It's quick, easy, and if you are at like a rest area or just need to crash for a little bit because you're getting drowsy, sleeping in the vehicle is acceptable. It can also be, if you have the right setup with a sleeping pad and like a quilt or a blanket or a sleeping bag, it's good. Also very secure. You feel kind of safe because you can lock the doors. It's also very stealth. Also, if you get some window coverings or something, if it's like a system for you, when we travel in my Scout Traveler, I've spent many nights in the back with a sleeping pad, nice sleeping bag, and a blanket. It's actually super comfortable. It's quiet. I like it. Problem is when you start to introduce, like, you're with a buddy or with a family, it becomes less workable. When we travel in my square body Suburban with like a rooftop tent, and I have 4 kids, so if it's all 6 of us, usually 2 of the kids will sleep inside the Suburban. 2 will sleep in the rooftop tent. 2 will sleep in the FSR trailer, like that also has another tent. Cons, it can get kind of stuffy because there's like typically you don't have screens on the windows, and so if it's primo weather, not a lot of bugs, yeah, you can crack the windows. But if it's buggy, which I've definitely experienced this, road trip to Alabama with my daughter, F-250 crew cabs. I slept in the front seat. She slept in the back seat, they're both benches, so it wasn't so bad. But it was like $120 and super buggy and humid. And so we either had to choose like death by sweating or death by mosquitoes. And it was just like, I remember she just like kind of cried herself to sleep. So shout out to Liv for being a good road trip buddy. So without, depending on the vehicle, it can be kind of cramped. Again, like a Scout 2 with a rear seat or a Scout 800 with a rear seat. If you don't feel like leaving the tailgate open, you're going to be pretty cramped. Especially if you're over 5'10", you're going to be hurting. So definitely some cons with it. So that's sleeping in a vehicle. Good option. And some people, like a couple buddies, like Chris Cortez, he I can't remember his Instagram handle, but he's got an actual system in his Ford Excursion that is like a platform. So to remove the the middle seat and the third row seat. And they like a lot of people have that system pretty dialed. And it's possible Luke in his yellow Scout 2 has this system where he has like this storage container box that's like 12 inches thick. And then he folds the bench seat down, doesn't tumble it, just folds it down. And Luke's like 6'3", and has like this plywood piece that folds out from his storage container, and it forms like a platform. And he's pretty dialed on that thing. And it's, again, quick, easy, secure. If it's really cold, you can fire up the vehicle in the middle of the night. I've definitely done that tons of times. Run it for half hour, warm the place back up, fall back asleep. Now we're going to go kind of in order of ease and simplicity. Again, hammock is another option. Ben from our shop, he always sleeps in a hammock when he's solo. And a hammock can be great, super lightweight, easy to pack, does not take up a lot of gear space. Again, you need the right setup. Does it have, and again, there's lots of hammock companies. We have one of the ones from Nemo. It's got a rain fly built in, a bug net built in. So that's the pros. Get the right one. It's fast to set up. It's lightweight. Cons is it can be kind of miserable in high winds, like the hammock's literally swaying back and forth. You have to have trees. So if you were in the desert or in a rest area, like which we've done, man, we've hooked them from vehicle to vehicle. If you have like a hammock with like one of us will be sleeping in the vehicle that is connected to a hammock, which is connected to another vehicle that has someone in a rooftop tent. When the hammock moves, like the vehicle moves, or when someone moves in the vehicle, the hammock sways. So, and it can be really cold. I know Ben, in his hammock, he'll put like a sleeping pad down, like a blanket, a sleeping pad, and then his sleeping bag. And he's surprisingly been in like some wicked cold weather with that pad setup. So can be good. My recommendation with all of these things is give it a try. That's my best recommendation. I've slept in a hammock a couple times. I know, like in California, road trips and camping, my daughters love to bust out the hammocks when we're up in the rooftop tent. It is kind of peaceful. It's kind of cool to wake up and just have your face right there in the open air. But again, if you don't have the right setup, you can wake up and you're soaking wet with dew or whatever. So that's the hammock. And there are people for sure that know a ton more about that. And we'll talk to Ben about that more in the future. Some people love it. Some people hate it. My recommendation is that you should have a hammock just in case. It's a good option for like if it's a good weather for a buddy or someone, one of your kids, to sleep in the hammock or two. Okay, the tried and true ground tent. Ground tents. I'm going to say we're going to talk about a quality ground tent. You can definitely go to like Walmart and buy a Coleman tent, and it's going to work. My experience is they won't last, and they won't work. They're not the greatest setup. But again, all that's to say, don't get too hung up on like I have to have the best gear to go on a road trip. Don't get into that trap. So just go, get what you can afford, and get out there. But pros to the ground tents: cost effective. They're space and weight effective, meaning they're very small, lightweight, easy to pack. Now, I will say if you have a large family, like my family of 6, we've had a couple different ones, like this REI Kingdom 8, which literally sits in a duffel bag that's like 3 feet by 2 feet around. It's pretty big. Oh yeah, I wanted to give a special shout out to Michael from Brandcast, who produces this podcast. He's going to have some visuals either over here or over here showing you this stuff, so you don't just have to stare at me while I'm talking. So thank you, Michael, for working that out, and I'm pretty stoked to see how it looks. But anyway, REI Kingdom 8, we had that for years. Tons of Colorado trips, like California trips, Iowa camping. Kind of a pain to set up. The bigger the tent, the more of a pain it is to set up. And the bigger the tent, obviously, the more space it takes up. But fit a family of 6, and all their luggage in a tent is pretty impressive and small for that much space. My favorite tent is actually for car camping. This is specific around vehicle-based adventure, not backpacking or hunting, is the Nemo Wagon Top. It's a 4-person tent. You can stand up in it. It's very spacious, very stable. I've had it in like some pretty high wind situations, even though it's not like a 4-season, like, expedition tent. It holds up really well. And that's a favorite that you probably should have a ground tent in your arsenal. So check out that Nemo Wagon Top. And it's got like a garage feature. But anyway, really good options out there for 1 to 10 people. Tents are versatile. You can I have a little, again, sorry to keep Nemo's the brand I like. But I've had a lot of different brands of tents, and a lot of them are good. But I have this little, I think it's called a Blaze, and it's technically a 2-person, but it's like literally the size, it's like 18 inches by like 3 inches around, weighs like less than it's like 1.5 pounds. I've taken that thing many times in my suitcase with a tiny sleeping pad and just crashing, going surfing, whatever. It's really cool to have a lightweight, especially if you're on a motorcycle, something like that, a lightweight small tent is really awesome. So relatively easy and quick to set up. Another pros, you're connected to nature. Nothing better than like going to sleep in a tent without the rain fly on it. It's just like all that mesh, and you just see the stars and smell the smells. It's really awesome. Now, the cons of a tent: you are ground dependent. So if it's real rocky ground or in the desert, or you got to think about that. It might take some extra time to clear out some space on the ground. Or if it's unlevel, good luck. You're kind of like hosed. And I've been mountaineering in situations where you literally have to dig and like take an hour to like make a small level patch of ground. Okay. Be careful where you set up. One Colorado camping trip, we set up like, and it's totally my bad and totally inexperienced, but we set up in this like, it looked cool, and it was totally dry, but I live in Iowa and I'm not used to the daily Colorado thunder showers. So we went out like for a day hike, and we set up like right in this wash, and like a big tent, all like our stuff in it. And literally, like it was like a flash flood through this area, and it's like wiped out the tent, got everything. It was terrible. So be careful where you set it up. Also, this was a big one for my family, like for particularly my wife. Love you, Heather. You feel real, and I feel this too. You feel really vulnerable, and it's like you've heard the phrase like a bear burrito. And it's mostly just in your imagination, but I always imagine like I'm sleeping next to the wall of the tent and someone just like stabs me through the tent, or like a bear grabs you and disembowels you. And like when you're sleeping in a ground tent, especially out in the wilderness, like any noise you hear, you're like, oh man, you just like, I find myself being hypersensitive to my surroundings, which is kind of cool, but also just you feel vulnerable. There's not a lot of security. And another con is you're not going to set it up in a rest area or truck stop or, so it's like you need to be in a campground or a wilderness or BLM area. But tent, you should have one in the quiver, and it's really cool. Just going to mention this briefly because I've never used one. But one of my favorite YouTube shows is, I can't remember, it's like some Australia dudes. It's like 4-wheel off-road. It's like, anyway, it's an Australian show, really, really fun show. They're like hour-long episodes. Some people say they're too long. I love them. But they like use these swag setups. So I've never personally used a swag, but it's kind of like a large bivy sack. So it's like a single person roll up. It's like, picture like a small rooftop tent, but you roll it up. So it's got like a padded mattress or a sleeping pad, pretty bomber. They're also like designed to either go on the ground or onto a hammock, but just Google like Australian swag setup, and they look pretty cool. Versatile, quick, easy, lightweight. Okay, now the topic that Handsome Cal was asking about, and I love to talk about because I really enjoy rooftop tents. So, what is our favorite? Well, first off, my favorite brand, and I know they're a sponsor, but they're a sponsor because I fell in love with their product first, and it's FSR. It's why we reached out to partner with them, and they're a great company, and we've become friends with them. But just love their innovation and design and quality. My first rooftop tent was a Hannibal brand. I got it probably 12 years ago, and it was like $3,500. It was from South Africa. Like it was like rooftop tents weren't really a thing in the US at the time, but it was just like safari grade, pretty bomber, like really nice, cool. Like it was a pretty from camping, like for most of my life since I was a kid, it was a pretty profound experience to like set it up and go up there my first night because it's like dark, you're off the ground. So anyway, let me get into the pros and cons as I've written them. And we're going to explore really two to three styles. There are soft shell tents. And now a soft shell is what you typically see when you see a rooftop tent, and that's that it folds out double its footprint, if that makes sense. So if it's a 48 by 48 rooftop tent, when you fold it open, it's now 96 by 48. And those are the ones that you see. They're called soft shell tents. Very, very common, affordable. Anyway, getting into it. Second style, hard shell. Hard shell is when it literally has a hard bottom and a hard top. And it typically either clamshells open like the long way, clamshells open to the side, or just straight up, goes straight up and down. Oftentimes they're assisted. They have some kind of like hydraulic air shock or air strut that assists it opening and closing. And then there's kind of a hybrid. I don't know technically I'm not a rooftop tent salesperson, so I'm just going off of my experience and what I've learned. But the hybrid is like, I know like iCamper makes one. It's like where it's a hard shell tent, opens up, but it also like folds out. So you still get the benefit of more size. And within those three styles, if that hybrid is a style, there are definitely like brand variances, quality differences, just like someone that builds a car or how we build a Ford. We have a very particular way that we like to build our Scouts and Jeeps. Tent companies have a very definitive and unique way, an individual way that they interpret the rooftop tent experience. And so we could do a whole show on this, and we will. We're going to have one of the FSR folks join us just to talk about what goes into designing a rooftop tent, because it's pretty cool, some of the innovations. So we're going to cover the basics. And yes, we're 28 minutes in. Time is flying, and we're having a good time. So let's start with the hard shell tents. I have the least amount of experience with hard shell tents, but the pros from what I've experienced, number one, super easy to set up. A hard shell tent, literally, you typically unclasp anywhere from 4 to 6 like clasps, and then bam, touch it with your finger. The air shocks, air struts do their thing. Tent is set up. Very easy to set up. What's also cool in that setup time is like that you can leave your bedding inside the hard shell tent. That to some people is really big. You're tired from being on the road all day or on the trail. You clip. And some have different techniques on how the ladder folds out. Hook up the ladder, which oftentimes in a hard shell, they're separate. So you'd carry the ladder in your trailer or in your vehicle. Clip it on, clip. Psh. You set up, you're ready for bed, dude. It's like, take like a minute and you're like in bed, ready to go. Generally, they're more durable in the closed position, especially if you leave it on your rig. One of my rooftop tents, I think it was an older, less expensive Front Runner. I left it on my vehicle like all summer, and by the end of the summer, the cover had like destroyed itself. It was just all sun baked and it like started leaking. So I had to make a new cover. Hard shell tents, if you're going to leave it on, which we'll talk about that in general, putting a rooftop, one of the cons to a rooftop tent in general is they are big and heavy and they're kind of a pain. Definitely like a multi-person, 2 to 3 person job to get up and huff it onto your vehicle. The taller your vehicle is, the more difficult that it is to get them on and off. So if you're going to leave it on, you might want to think about getting a hard shell, more durable. The good ones, another pro, the good ones have actually weight bearing capacity, which is tied to the weaknesses in my opinion. But like a lot of the good ones will have like a little roof rack or load carrying capacity in the closed and or open position. So like you could have some MaxTrax or a solar panel or a bicycle. Bicycle might be pushing it, but or surfboard. Have it on there. When you open it, that stuff stays on the tent. Pretty cool. Not all of them do this. Some of them do it. I'm sure there are other pros, but that's. I had one tent that a buddy had that was like, it was very easy to open, but really difficult to kind of like close. It would like, you'd have to like line it up and it was big and it was kind of a pain. But anyway, some of the cons, takes up your entire roof rack. So if you have a traditional roof rack, the hard shell tent is going to take up that whole roof rack. Now on my Suburban, I've got like this Front Runner Super Extendo, like it's a long roof rack. I have enough room for a hard shell tent and like 2 Alu boxes, and it is perfect. I love it. But on a Scout, Bronco, FJ60, you're not going to have that kind of space. So it's going to take up the whole roof rack, and it's only as big as the footprint of the actual tent. Typically, I'm pretty positive about this, except for again those hybrids. They're going to be 49 inches wide or 55, which is like 49 is equivalent to like a twin size mattress. A 55 would be equivalent to like a full size or a double, if you want to think about it that way. Next con, they're pretty expensive. They're typically, I would say, 30%, 25 to 40% more expensive than an equivalent soft shell. And again, that's like apples to apples. Because you could have a super cheap soft shell. I don't know if there are a lot of like cheap hard shell tents. Most of them are like higher quality. And some are definitely better than others. So I would recommend, if you're interested in any tent, go to like an event like the Overland Expo or local like overlanding meetups. Like go to those things and just check out the tents. Like and most people that own any gear are like happy to show you. That's like part of the fun. So, man, go up and say like, hey, how do you like this tent? How do you like this brand? What don't you like? What would you do different? Would you buy it? Would you buy it again? What do you think about this on my rig? Ask questions. That's like, I love answering those questions. Most people do, but the hard shell especially. And make sure some of the cons too. The hard shells are just kind of like dopey looking on the roof because they're like just big and bulbous, and I don't love all of them. The new like FSR Odyssey is 7 inches thick. It's very slick. I know like Alu Cab makes a very good quality hard shell that is like sleek looking, particularly on a vintage 4x4. You don't want a real like curvy, bubbly kind of rooftop tent on a vintage 4x4. It doesn't really go together. And lastly on my list of cons is they're kind of like a little more heavy. So hoisting that sucker up there, you better get some buddies to help you. And anyway, so that's hard shell tents I have got way more experience in soft shell tents. I've got a couple new hard shell tents from FSR that I'm really excited to get a lot of. We'll do some video reviews. We're going to put a lot of miles and nights in those tents. So we'll keep you posted. But I'm stoked on the hard shells. Soft shell or like the folding tent, pros, generally easier to get into, more affordable. It doubles its footprint size. So if you have a Scout, like this orange one here, you still have room on your roof rack for a solar panel, for MaxTrax, for Alu boxes, because space inside the vehicle is precious. I'm thinking of my friend Greg, good old G-Docs, family of 4 plus a big old dog. Inside of a Scout 2, it's almost impossible to pack all of it is impossible to do like even a weekend camping adventure trip just with the capacity, internal storage capacity of a Scout. The roof rack frees you up. Now, I will mention, be careful, do not overload your roof rack. It's the worst place to put a lot of weight. So be cognizant of that. It's going to make the vehicle track and act differently. When we're building our vehicles and we know the customer wants a roof rack or a tent, we'll typically modify rear sway bar. We'll modify the springs that we use. So if you're getting a truck build, talk to your builder about that. New vehicles, check the specs and be informed that way. More space capacity. I know, like, man, the FSR High Country 80 that we have, it's 80 inches wide. That's like a king size mattress. When it folds open, it is enormous and it's awesome. So that's like, it's like a little too big for just my wife and I, but if it's like my wife and I, and our kids are kind of grown now, but like in 1 kid or 2 kids, we've had 4 people in there and there's enough space to have you and your gear inside. You don't want to have your clothing and gear and toiletries, like maybe the toiletries, but your clothing in the vehicle and you're up in the tent because there's no room. It's nice to have a private place to camp and to change and just have your stuff. Another pro to I should have said this, like another pro to rooftop tents. Let me just go into some pros and cons of rooftop tents versus like a ground tent or a hammock. You feel less vulnerable, like you feel safer. I know I do, like protecting my family. Like when you're up in the rooftop tent, at least you have time to react. If there's a bear scratching at your ladder, you're going to hear it and wake up and be like ready to rock and roll. If it's a person, you're going to be ready for that and you just feel more secure. The ground, you're less dependent on the ground. It's pretty easy to level off a vehicle, even on level ground. You can stack rocks, wood. You can use MaxTrax. There's a lot of different options for that. They're like a good rooftop tent. Like you can black them out, dude. You could wake up at noon and you have no idea what time it is. They're so dark. And some of them have skylights. Some of them have zippered windows. Like we've depending on the weather and like what's going on. They're also like more private, like a little more. They're typically thicker walled than a ground tent, so there's more a feeling of privacy. You can have a light on and not bother other people. It's kind of a weird point, but or a quiet conversation. You just don't feel like everyone's listening to you. But they're definitely like, and some of the cons are they're heavier, they're way more expensive, some of that kind of stuff. But again, back to soft shells. So they're often lighter than hard shell tents. With a soft shell and that more space, like a lot of soft shell tents, you can get an annex, and an annex is essentially like another tent area that's down at the foot. So when it folds out and open in that area underneath the tent, you can actually you'll zipper on another room. In the winter, you can put a heater down in there. You can store your gear. You could have your dog down there. There's a lot of cool, or have kids on cots. Like there's a lot of expandability, which leads me to another one. You kind of get a built-in awning. There's been many days and nights when like we're chilling underneath the rooftop tent. So it kind of gives you that weather protection. Okay, cons in a soft shell. And sorry if I'm like rambling, but man, we're 40 minutes in. I just love talking about this stuff. Cons in a soft shell, the bedding can't stay in the tent. When you fold it up, there's generally not enough space. Maybe like with a super lightweight sheet or something like that, or a light sleeping bag. And on Instagram, OK.Jacobo asks, like, do we like blankets or sleeping bags in a rooftop tent? And actually, that was a great question because my wife and I were just talking about, we always use sleeping bags, and we're kind of like, for like years. And I was just like, why do we use sleeping bags? We can just have like a quilt or a blanket and just kind of have more of like a home bed up there. So we're going to try that. So we'll report back on that. Soft shell takes a little more time to set up. Particularly, it's one of the things I love about FSR, particularly if you don't have to fuss with those zippers and the little metal poles that hold like the rain awnings up. FSR doesn't use that style. So in my opinion, in my experience, the FSR tents are way faster to set up. And I'm sure other brands have that as well. I'm just familiar with a few, 3 or 4 different brands that I've owned. Soft shell is a little more weather affected because you're up high. If it's windy, like the whole vehicle can sway, and it's like can get a little an excessive rain and wind. But you're kind of like short of being inside the vehicle, ground tent. All those things are going to be pretty affected by that. Okay, so that should get you pumped and thinking about sleeping systems for overlanding, off-roading, road trips. We have added to our fleet. I'll get into it. So, the big point is get out there. Don't let the gear become a hindrance. Don't buy junk, but don't let it be a hindrance. So what is my family? What is my favorite and our family's favorite? I'll answer it like this. For solo, if I'm on a solo trip just with the dudes and not in my the Shenandoah, which is just like a single cab pickup. I don't have like a bench seat. But if I'm in a Scout or like an SUV style vehicle, I prefer to sleep in the vehicle. That's my go-to because I can have like the fridge. I can have a couple Alu boxes. All you need is like a 2-foot wide space to sleep inside and be pretty comfortable. So that's my go-to if I'm alone. If it's just my wife and I would probably prefer a hard shell. Easy to set up, keep the bedding in there. Safe, secure, awesome, good to go. If I have a family, 3 to 4 people, I know good friends of ours, Ginger the Scout, that's their Instagram page. They have a family of 5. Dude, I think they have 3 kids. Yeah, 3 little cool kids. And they all, family of 5, sleep up in their FSR High Country 80. Super fun, super cool. They pop an electric blanket in there, and it's fun. We should also talk about heating systems, but we won't get to that right now. So that's like for a family or if you're 3 or 4 dudes, which I wouldn't want to do necessarily, but a larger soft shell is a great option for you. Trips I'm dreaming about for this, like as we talk about gear, I'm getting excited and we're kind of getting our fleet ready. Going to Moab, we're doing a meetup in Wisconsin and Michigan, like going across Lake Michigan into the Silver Lake area. I'm very excited about that because it's an area of the country I've not spent a lot of time. Also last year in the fall, my family, we grabbed the kids and just did a little impromptu trip to Wyoming, South Dakota, and Montana. Pure magic. For those of you that are on the West Coast, yes, you have tons of great stuff in Arizona, Utah, even Texas, California. Love it. I love that place and those places. The diversity, the country's big. It's awesome. But if you've never gotten out to Wyoming, South Dakota, Montana, man, I feel for you. Get out there. It's just beautiful country, and there's Badlands, Black Hills. There's some cool like Mount Rushmore's cool. Devil's Tower's cool. It's awesome. Also, a sleeper, dreaming about a trip to Arkansas. There's some really cool places in Arkansas and beautiful country, even places to go off-road. So I'm pretty pumped about doing that. And from us, it's like a 6 to 8 hour trip, and that's pretty easy. Okay, a friend of ours, Fujifilm X Pro 2, who drove a Scout 800 original powertrain from LA to New York in the midst of this whole coronavirus thing. So we got to talk to you, bro, and see how that trip goes. Let's schedule to get you on the podcast. And it was a big undertaking and pretty just I'm just glad to know him, and it's an exciting thing. He asked, of all the equipment I've invested in, what has surprised me, big or small? So I'll kind of say, like, what are the essential things that have really transformed our overlanding or camping or just that experience? And these are not necessarily in order of importance or surprise-itude. Number one, I've loved like a little Discada, like some people call it the Scottle or whatever. It's just I took a farm disc, welded a plug in it, put some handles on it, bought off Amazon. It's like $18 Coleman burner. You put a propane thing on there. Like, we mostly travel either with a larger family or like in the group one with the guys. And that thing is rad, man. Super versatile. Great for like bringing people together. You just kind of get people cooking around, and like it's so versatile for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Cooked all kinds of meals on it, from tacos to burgers to French dip sandwiches, like whatever. So those are kind of cool. You can buy one, but they're pretty easy to make if you have basic welding skills. One thing I learned about that is those discs, those farm discs, are hardened. So you have to like preheat it and like weld it correctly, because I didn't realize that the first time I welded one together and the handles just like came right off. Second piece of kit that I have, it was at the time I purchased it, it was like oh, these are expensive. But these Alu boxes, so they're like these aluminum weather tight little storage boxes. And I have a few of them now, and they are awesome. And why they're so important to me is because creating organization systems is very important. I don't know about you, but when we go on trips, they're typically pretty chaotic, because we're like trying to get rigs ready. And those of you that have a vintage 4x4 and take a trip in it, you know what I'm talking about. There's maintenance. You're worried about all this stuff, especially with kids. And so to have little systems that force you to stay organized, and you can just grab them and go, this is my kitchen stuff. This is my camp gear stuff. This is my clothing. Like, those organized systems will enhance your trip more than you can imagine. If you're all chaotic and you got junk everywhere, that's going to filter into your trip, and it's just going to be not as enjoyable. So, and there's like Blue Ridge gear, I think it's called. Like, there's a number of like little packing cubes. I have this kitchen kit. I think it's from Blue Ridge Overland Gear or something like that. But it keeps like all my knives and spices. Not even for me, for like other people that cook. My wife and daughter, they love it. So those have been huge. Organization systems. The Alu boxes, they're like $250, $260 for a box, but they last forever. You can get organization systems. Those are available through Equipped One. Great stuff. Second big one, man, was the Nemo Helio, like a portable pressurized shower system. It takes up no space, but the ability to take a shower, wash dishes, it's very versatile. Like, my guys have them. My buddies have them. They are super cool. So Nemo Helio, and there's a couple different options, but that's my favorite. Another game changer was getting a fridge. Man, we lived with coolers for 20 years. Finally broke down and got a fridge. Excuse me. And man, what a game changer. Getting ice is such a hassle. And like dealing with the water and melting ice. And yeah, like Yetis were a huge evolution in the cooler world, but like they are so efficient that they're like half the space inside that they are on the outside. So simple. There's a bunch of different brands. I don't even want to. I have a Dometic CFX 50, I think. It's bulletproof, dude. I've had it like in the back of my Shenandoah, which is an open flatbed in the rain and snow, and it just keeps on kicking. Fun little story. As the shutdowns and stuff like that started rolling, we wanted to, like, not crazy, but like we didn't stock up on toilet paper, but we stocked up on some just frozen foods. And our freezer in our garage took a dump. So man, I fired up the Dometic fridge. Money. That thing's been saving our butts for the last 2 weeks. Very efficient, really cool. You have to make sure you have a good battery, good charging system. Potentially like a solar panel charging system is a necessity. And from my family's perspective, a lot of you know I've talked about this before. From our family road trip camping experience, and most of our trips are like on-road, off-road. We like primitive campsites, BLM land. We stay at a fair amount of campgrounds as well. But the little FSR adventure trailer, and there's like Turtleback makes some super nice ones. There's a bunch of companies that go from like the FSR one is super entry level. It's very affordable. It's not crazy. It has no features. It's just a box with lights, and you can put a tent on top of it. And I think it's like 4x6, barely. But man, what a game changer to get the stuff out of the vehicles, because we'd have like stuff on the roof rack, stuff on the back piled full. We have a dog and 4 kids, and like my wife and I, it was overwhelming. Get that, even when it's just like me and my buddies or the guys, a place to put all that stuff and have the vehicle nice and clear and clean and organized, have the tent set up. So if like at Moab, it's awesome because like you leave the FSR trailer set up, and you just hit the road and you come back and your bed's already set up. So that's would be one more con to a rooftop tent, is like you can't move the vehicle without breaking down all the tent. So that, and it's vehicle versatile. So I've towed it with my Scout, my Traveler, my 4-cylinder Scout, the Suburban. You could tow with a CRV, an Outback, whatever. They're lightweight. So check those out. I do wish, like, we're kind of ready for one to have like a fixed kitchen, because that would just be really nice. So like I've been looking at a couple different options, but they get expensive quick. I think the FSR one's like $7,000. Like some of the other like more premium trailers, they can get up to like 25, 45, 50 grand, but they have like, they're incredible, and they're feats of engineering prowess, you know, like there's so much stuff built into them in a small space. But so anyway, man, we did it. That's the episode. I hope that you can dream of brighter days, of getting out there, plan some trips. We're still, you know, Lord willing, still planning a meetup in Southern California. It may have to get pushed into July. It's on the books for June. It may have to get pushed into July. We were excited for that. Get together with get your family, man. Just go to like a local state park when they open up, and go camping. Like, just get out there and do something, man. Make some memories. Don't be so caught up in working. I know for me, like, it's so easy for those of us that just hustle, man. Like, we work all the time. We are just so busy that your kids just grow up and you realize, like, we haven't done any. Do my kids have good memories of their childhood? I know for me, my parents were busy, but we camped a lot. We took simple vacations. Like, it was important. So those things are really important. And nobody says on their deathbed, I wish that I worked more. So now is the time. If you've got a vintage 4x4, you're already in the game, but you don't even need a vintage 4x4 to get out there. Take your Mitsubishi Montero and go hit some adventure somewhere. So until next time, thanks for listening. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and to be with you. See you next time.